Hi guys, quick disclaimer here. This podcast discusses the world of mental health and wellness, but it's not a substitute for the help of an appropriately qualified professional. On with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to A Spoonful of Theory. It's a monthly podcast looking at the facts, theories and stories from around the world of wellness and mental health. Each month Ben and I will be joined by a guest who has the same passion and interest in all things mental health related to present their fact from the past, present or future.
Not today though, eh?
Well, yeah, not today. As it's a first podcast, we thought we'd introduce ourselves and our podcast so you can get to know what it's about. So, Ben, who are you?
This feels a little bit like Mastermind. I'm Ben Gaskell. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist based in Manchester and my specialist subject is anxiety. I'm sat next to Jenny, who is...
Also a clinical hypnotherapist. That definitely is a thing. There's at least two of us in the world. And yeah, I practice in South Manchester, Central Manchester, and also specialise in anxiety. Right, Ben, so over to you for our first fact.
Okay, so I might be trying to shoehorn this in a little bit, but a spoonful of sugar might actually help us. And this is that doctors are finding one way that sugar can benefit your health. It may be able to heal wounds when antibiotics fail. So this is a fact that I actually saw in a couple of places. I saw this in the BBC, and it's about a guy called Moses Mirandu. I'm sorry if I've read that wrong. And he has a pilot study that actually won an award. So I did see it in 2013. It was Medical News Today. I just had a quick look. And it won an award in the Journal of Wound Care in March 2018. So basically, he says, like sugar, the knowledge came raw from Zimbabwe. It was refined here and is now going back to help the people of Africa. No, it's quite interesting fact, because sugar gets a bit of a bad rep. But Moses Mirandu was from rural eastern highlands of Zimbabwe. And they used to rub salt in his wounds. That's not just a saying. Literally, his father would rub salt in his wounds.
That's what, as a punishment? Or
no, to help heal the wounds. Because they didn't have the kind of medicine that we have over here. They didn't have the NHS. So what he talked about is that when his father had some money, they could afford honey, they could afford sugar. And so he was very lucky in that they would use sugar and honey. And he noticed himself that those wounds would heal a little bit quicker. Obviously, you know, he's got no facts to back that up. It's all anecdotal. So when he came to Britain, he eventually became a senior lecturer in adult nursing at the University of Wolverhampton. And so he decided to run this pilot study. And this pilot study was to show the sugar's applications in wound healing. And that's when it won the award. So it actually was in 2013 that he started this study.
Was the award sponsored by Tate and Lyle by any chance?
Well, actually, there's a little bit later on where he talks about this is plain sugar. It's the granulated type that you might use to sweeten your tea. And so he talks about why they can't find funding from the pharmaceutical companies because... Well, why would they fund something that already exists? Sugar is abundant, they can't charge for it.
And you can get it cheaply.
And obviously this is conspiracy theories, so let's not go with this completely.
We're getting quite political.
A little bit, yeah, we've already talked about the NHS. But he says that these it helps wounds stopping bacteria that's resistant to antibiotics. And he claims to have proved that it works.
Wow.
He did a study with 41 people in there in the UK, and he hasn't published those trial results yet, but he's going to present them at national and international conferences. And yeah, this is something that he claims that other studies have also found. It can also be used on diabetics. So sugar in sucrose, you need the enzyme sucrase to convert that into glucose. So there shouldn't be a problem with diabetics using that either.
Okay.
And there's somebody in America, Maureen McMichael.
These are good names.
Yeah, and she's a US veterinarian, and she's using this on dogs and other pets, I'm assuming. But she talks about a pit bull that came in with wounds all over it, and she's using honey and sugar to help heal the wounds.
Well, I'd heard of honey before. Did he find a difference? Is the reason why I was looking at just... Would you think it was just cheap, available, maybe cheaper than honey?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, that's how he got into it. I mean, they were using salt originally, and he's not doing that either. So I assume it's just abundance and cheapness. So yeah, it's a really interesting study. In a way that sugar can be used in a positive way, because it does get a bad rep.
It does get a bad rep, funnily enough, yeah. Well, I mean, the UK government at the moment is hitting sugar hard because we all consume a bit too much of it. But it's interesting I was looking at the amount that they recommend, well, not that they recommend that we eat, but that we reduce it to. And they say we should keep it to 30 grams of free sugars, which that's sort of sugars that you add to food or drink. But it's also naturally occurring stuff like in honey. That's why I was a bit interested in the whole honey sugar. Was he finding a difference?
Because I always thought honey, I never really, I mean, maybe it's stupid of me, but I've never really seen honey as sugar. I've always just seen them as separate. And honey more really as good for you, as a positive thing. Well,
the thing that's challenging actually, it's not sugar. Glucose, for example, is fine.
Yeah.
The problem with these, when you see sugar on a packet, it'll say sugar, but actually typically that'll be 50% fructose, and fructose, funnily enough, is the one that's a problem for our bodies because our bodies don't recognise it as a sugar, and it gets processed in all sorts of strange ways.
Oh, is that the F from FODMAP? So fructose is one of those things that if you're on a FODMAP diet, because you've been suffering with IBS or something, you get put onto a diet that means you can process food quicker, easily. And so you can basically wean out which foods are harming you. And the F from FODMAP is fructose.
Oh, really?
So that makes sense, yeah.
Well, I don't know about the effect there for the IBS, but I do know that it does have an effect on our brains. And they did a study in rats. It's always the rats. Poor old rats. They're always getting it, aren't they?
Because we're so similar.
Yeah. Wait, I don't know.
Not me. I mean, not you either. Oh, let's just leave it there. Let's move on.
Well, what they found was that the study in rats was that the consumption of the fructose would change the nature of the opioid type receptors in our brain.
Right.
And so the rats would essentially become addicted to sugar. And so they would seek it out because it has this strange effect on cortisol and dopamine and all sorts of brain chemicals.
Yeah.
So it might be great to rub it in your wounds, but actually consuming it in your body is not such a great thing.
Do you need a certain amount of it though? Is it something you couldn't really cut out completely? Or do you need to have a little bit about that?
Fructose, I think you could cut out completely. But the interesting thing about the government, the UK government guidelines, they don't mention any of this effect about how the fact that you will have this slight addiction, you will start seeking it out when you haven't got it. But they're 30 grams of free sugars. If you half that to 15 grams, so say half of that was fructose, that's exactly what other scientists are saying, that your body can actually, it can take that amount with no ill effect, especially if it's in the original package it came from. For example, if you eat a pear and it's full of fibre, for some reason that they don't understand, fibre helps you process it. And it doesn't mess up things in your body quite so much. So there is amount you can eat and it's okay, it won't start to interfere with things. But beyond that, you start to seek out sugar. And the other thing is it works against your appetite system as well. So you'll consume sugar. You might think, okay, I'm going to eat 100 calories of Kit Kat, but what you don't know is all the extra calories that you're going to eat because you've got this strange craving or notion to eat things and seek things out. You're seeking out sugar, but you'll just eat other stuff. So it kind of messes up your appetite as well.
So is that affecting your dopamine? And is this why people like cake and keep eating cake? They get that kind of dopamine hit from the cake and they got the sugar in it. Because I know people do talk about sugar as being as addictive as,
well, it is having this, is having this literal, like you're taking opiates. It's having that effect in the brain, at least of rats.
Sounds right to me. Okay, so should we move on to our next fact?
Sure, I think that's me. Right, so my fact for you, Ben, is that stress was invented in 1936 by a doctor called Hans Selye.
Well, that's a good fact, except I've got an elderly relative, and I'm not naming any names, Grandad, that is probably older than that, and was definitely stressed before that, as an infant, without doubt.
You're a stressed out infant, Grandad.
Yeah, he's definitely a stressed out infant.
Well, I mean, obviously we've been experiencing what we would now call stress, since there were human beings to be stressed. But the difference is that it wasn't picked up as a specific medical term until 1936. And that has quite big ramifications, because until that time, people were thinking of a lot of things that we now quite day to day will refer to as stress or the effect of stress on us, and we recognise that. I feel everybody recognises that.
Yeah, it's kind of a universal word, isn't it?
It is a universal word, but at that time in 1936, they didn't even what we now think is commonplace. They didn't even necessarily connect obvious stress responses to an experience of stress. For example, you know, back in the American Civil War, they had a condition called soldier's heart, for example.
Right.
Yeah, and that was noticed by doctors. So people were seeing stuff.
Yeah.
And then in World War One, this is maybe more commonly known. Shell shock was first attributed to people's brains shaking. They thought this must be some physical condition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was abandoned later on, but then became known as battle fatigue.
Yeah.
So these people that were experiencing very, very stressful situations, it was still very much being attributed, the effects of that, to some physical thing that must have happened to them. But then what happened was Selly came along and he was experimenting on rats again. It's the rats. They're always getting it. These poor rats.
I'm keeping my comments on rats.
Yeah, we need to send.
I've been told I can't edit that out. So.
Well, we have to. We need to set up a campaign to save the rats. But he was injecting them with all sorts of lovely stuff, trying to find a hormonal response. And he tried this in various different ways. And the results, at first he was getting these results, he thought, this is great, I'm about to discover a major breakthrough because they're clearly getting ill from all these injections. But he injected them in all sorts of fabulous ways and got the same responses, even though he's injecting them in different places with different stuff.
So he was just stressing them out?
That's what he discovered, that it was the stress of undergoing this.
Wow.
It was the stress of undergoing the experiment that was actually ultimately tiring them out to the point where they were exhausted and they would die. And that's what he came to term as stress. It's a response. Let me make sure that I get this right. So he identified a process that started with firstly, it was an alarm reaction to whatever was happening in the case of the rats being injected with this sort of horrible foreign substance.
Yeah.
And that would kick off this fight, flight or freeze response. And then that would move into a resistance to that stress, the body fighting against what was going on. And then eventually, if you've survived all that, bearing it for that long would lead to exhaustion and a sort of aging due to wear and tear. And he identified this as a process, and he saw it also in, not just in rats, he saw it in other people who came in. There's a condition of just being sick in of itself is a thing, regardless. There's certain treatments we can give people who are ill, almost regardless of the illness, that benefit them. And he identified that this was treating the stress of being ill and the stress of being under attack.
This is kind of wellness. This is literally what we're kind of talking about.
And I find it very interesting, the idea that he could see that there was this overarching effect. And so there are universal things that can support and help you. And it doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't actually matter what stress you're under. There's various things that are going to help us, just as human beings, since the dawn of mankind up until your grandfather and beyond have suffered stress. There's also universal ways of sort of managing and supporting people in stress. Yeah.
Which is where we come in, essentially, isn't it? It's very much kind of our approach to things as clinical hypnotherapists. I think he's known as a bit of a marketer. He's known as somebody that definitely tried to push this word and say, look, everybody use this, everybody use my new word, or this word that's existed, but everybody use this meaning of this word. I did a little bit of research into this, and he talks about, literally this is a quote from him, it's enough to prevent the concept from ever slipping through our fingers again. I really like that, it's really simple. And I think I first read about this in a fantastic book by a lady called Sarah Wilson. Sarah Wilson is... I believe she's a journalist in Australia. I think she's quite well known over there, and she's written quite a few books. Some regarding sugar, I think, as well, obviously, as a bit of a link there. But I read a book, or I tried to read a book called First We Make the Beast Beautiful. Actually, this book was stolen from me by my wife, possibly to understand my anxieties. But it's an excellent book, and it's beautiful. It's a really nicely made book as well. But Wilson talks about anxiety. In very much the same way, in that kind of terminology, like we're not going to let it slip through our fingers again. And she talks about how the fact that in the 1950s there was only, or by the 1950s, there was only 2 books written about anxiety. Freud's The Problem of Anxiety and Soren Kierkegaard's The Concept of Anxiety, which is insane considering how much we use that word to this day. And it wasn't until 1980 that the 3rd edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, and this is a book that's supposedly used by mental health professions all over the West, that it was first classified as a mental disorder. And
when was that again?
So 1980.
1980.
Yeah, that's not long. That's
so we got stressed in 36, and then we got anxious in 80.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Actually, I mean, they talk about these terms earlier. So stress, 1936, but he probably didn't get it into the kind of vocabulary of health professionals until the 1950s. That's when they started using it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, these are still very modern terms if you think about it in those terms.
It's funny how quickly we can become so used to them, because
Yeah.
I feel that even in my recent years, the term mindfulness, for example, I'm sure had a very, very specific meaning, and now people will use it routinely. Even in office, we need to be mindful of this. I mean, okay, that's how you use it, but they mean something else by it now, and then it has this specific connotation.
And also, sometimes those connotations can be manipulated. So I don't want to go back into conspiracy theory territory here,
but
yeah, I am going to. Sarah Wilson talks about how it was just before that third edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, when they recognised it. That's a mouthful. It was just before that the first anxiety drugs were manufactured. So just before it was recognised, these drugs were created for it, which is an eerie coincidence, as she points out.
Is that not like Listerine? We didn't have bad breath till they invented Listerine.
I mean, I'm not comparing anxiety to Listerine.
Or bad breath.
But no, I mean, Listerine, as I understood it, was for cleaning floors.
Yes.
And so they invented halitosis, was the specific thing.
Well, you're using a fancy word, but it's the same thing. Come on.
It's not that fancy, is it? Halitosis.
Well, maybe not for you.
I don't put that on my resume. I don't put that on my CV. I've got halitosis. It's dead posh. Right, so should we move on to the next fact?
Yeah.
I'm moving on to the next fact, and it's mine, because I'm rude like that. Playing the didgeridoo could help you to stop snoring.
What? Playing the didgeridoo while you're sleeping?
No, I mean, that won't... I mean, you won't be snoring, to be fair. But it's probably more annoying to your partner. So I like this one, and for that very reason. So we often talk to our colleagues about helping a partner if somebody snores, because there's not much we can do for people that snore, at least from my perspective. And so we tell them to get and they've often been told by their partners to get in touch, because they're the ones that are suffering. They're the ones that it's actually affecting their sleep, it's affecting their life. And I think I might have first heard this from another great podcast, No Such Thing as a Fish, or QI, but as it relates to what we do, I also found it on the Huffington Post. And if you've not had a listen to any of those podcasts, if you've not had a listen to No Such Thing as a Fish, and you like fact-based podcasts, then I would definitely have a quick listen to that.
Yeah, check it out.
Now, there's a name here that I can definitely not pronounce. I'm not even sure why he's in the article, if I'm totally honest with you. But this is a artist and acupuncturist in Vancouver, Canada College, called Abdiah Jones Darrell, or Abdiah Jones Darrell. And he said he would spend long hours on campus studying in the library. He would fall asleep and then would wake up hearing a loud noise. I think other students in the library were waking me up on purpose because I was snoring. And eventually he goes and he gets a CPAP machine. But it just didn't work for him. It was still affecting his sleep. He wasn't getting enough sleep.
A sleep apnea machine?
Yeah, CPAP. And so, yeah, he was diagnosed with sleep apnea, and he had the CPAP machine, and he still wasn't dreaming. And that's what he was worried about. I suppose as an artist, he still wasn't getting the kind of sleep that he wanted to get. He wasn't getting a proper night's sleep. So he looked for a more holistic approach. And yeah, he started breathing differently. He started practicing circular breathing. And again, I don't know why he's mentioned in this post, because then this Huffington Post talks about a 2006 study in the British Medical Journal, and there was a control group of around 50 men playing the didgeridoo for 25 minutes per day, 6 days a week. And it correlated with a significant reduction in daytime sleepiness. And while the study participants didn't know much difference in the quality of their sleep, their partners of the didgeridoo players reported far fewer nighttime disruptions.
Oh, so maybe it's worth putting up with 25 minutes of didgeridoo for 6 days a week.
Yeah,
good nice kit.
Yeah, if you're going to do it in the day. There is a doctor here called Dr. Emerson Wickwire.
Oh, come on. Where are you getting these names
I'm making
from?
them up. None of this is true. Do not listen to this. The director of Insomnia Program, an assistant professor of psychiatry and medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Another mouthful. Honestly, these things. He says singing tongue and throat exercises and even the didgeridoo have been known to reduce snoring, but he's quite cautious. He says it's critical to get properly diagnosed and treated by a doctor or an ear, nose and throat specialist. Yeah, it's quite interesting. He talks about snoring in terms of a kazoo or a saxophone. Basically, that's what's happening to our bodies, but it can become inflamed and lead to potentially fatal conditions called obstructive sleep apnea. And even this person, who I have no idea why he's in the article,
this artist.
Yeah, this artist and acupuncturist, Obadiah Jones Durrell, even he says, I think a medical solution should address how your body works, but a holistic approach is all about how your whole body is getting treatment to improve the quality of life. So even he says, make sure you see a doctor.
Well, yeah, I can see from his point of view, random as he was in the article or not, about the importance of a quality night's sleep. Because, you know, if there's something you're aspiring to, for example, you want you to be an artist, you want to be your artistic vision, you want to have access to all your faculties, so you need that quality of sleep.
Yeah.
And there was a study done on the quality of sleep, and the benefits on finding solutions and how the brain works coming out of that. And they took 3 groups of people and they gave them all a really complex problem in the morning.
Yeah.
And then one of the groups, they got them to solve it in the afternoon. And it was a really difficult problem. And only 20% of people could solve it then. Then the next group of people were asked to solve it the next morning.
Yeah.
But they'd had a really, really bad night's sleep.
Okay.
And only 20%. Still 20%, but it was a complex problem. They couldn't solve it. Now, the final group had had a really good night's sleep and were asked to solve it in the morning, and 70% of them could solve that really, really complex problem. And so that, and there's various other studies very similar to this, that just show that good quality of sleep has meant that something has been processed. So I can see I think that was quite a complex mathematical problem or something like that. But yeah, when everything can come online in the night, when you've had the rest, that's the start. But also there's other functions that are going on in the brain, isn't there?
Yeah, it clears out proteins. It literally kind of flushes the brain clean. Not to mention dreams. Running through the stress of the day and getting rid of that, moving it from emotional to narrative memory, essentially. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that sleep definitely helps with. And the perception of sleep, interestingly, I don't have it to hand, but there is a study that looked at the perception of sleep. So if you have a terrible night's sleep, but you're generally a positive person, you generally view it quite well, then you can do with less sleep. Or if you're one of those people that has always had a bad night's sleep, even if you've slept well, then you will fare worse during the day. You'll probably be a lot worse at a maths problem, even if you've had more hours sleep than that person that, had a difficult night.
So he needed didgeridoo and positive disposition, and then
definitely.
Sleep's not a problem for him.
That would definitely help. And bringing it back to the didgeridoo, I know you're interested in yoga and Buddhist practice, but one I like to use in sessions is 7-11 or rectangular breathing.
Yes,
breathing is quite important in all of those, and these are really useful for. And I'm going to use my buzzword of today.
Buzzword alert.
I'm going to use my it's useful for stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system and increasing vagal tone.
Vagal tone.
Vagal tone, yeah. So basically,
does that make you look better in a bikini?
No, probably. I always look bad in a bikini, so it's nice of you to think of me like that. But no, yeah. Even if I increase my vagal tone, that's not going to look good. So basically, what it's doing is we talked about that flight or freeze again. This is kind of linked back. Yeah. But what it helps you do is negotiate those difficulties a little bit better, rather than kicking in that fight, flight, or freeze. And I had a look around today because I thought we might talk about this, and I saw it in Psychology Today, and they had a really nice analogy about it, and I'm going to anglify this because it's very American. In fact, no, I might just leave it American and you can anglify it yourself. Your body contains 2 opposing peripheral nervous systems that act as a sort of gas and brake, accelerator and brake, speeding up and slowing down various functions within the body, the heart rate, digestion, etc. The parasympathetic nervous system is the brake in this analogy, while the sympathetic nervous system is the gas accelerator. Yeah, so I really like the idea of it as being that brake essentially to that fight or flight, fight or freeze.
So that's when we do these sort of breathing exercises and this deep breathing and all the different kinds of good breathing that we do, all these exercises people, yoga gurus and things will give us. That's what we're doing. We're kind of slowing down the system and taking us out of that fight, flight or freeze. It's
that rest or digest. And you can see it, in something as simple as my cat. My cat will not eat if anybody stood within 20 metres, if we're totally honest. If somebody's in the next room talking, the cat will not eat. It needs to feel safe. It needs to not have those that fight or flight triggered. It needs
so
to...
you get her to breathe deeply?
No, basically,
First the rats, now the cats.
So I inject her with... No, I don't. So basically, if she is calm, she will eat. Okay? And that parasympathetic nervous system is to do with that calm element. I don't get my cat to breathe. I mean, I don't stop her, but she has to feel that part of that system engaged. She has to feel like there's no threats about.
Yeah.
And so when we, for a person, or a rat probably, when we breathe, when we take control of the situation, we start doing, as I say, it's 7-11 breathing or rectangular breathing, then we're putting that brake on. We're slowing it down so that we can rest, we can digest, we can negotiate those difficulties. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and we look forward to bringing you a guest next episode. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at @aspoonful_. That's at @aspoonful_, or you can use the hashtag #aspoonful. There are other people using that, but not since 2013, and it's all recipes, so it's very nice anyway. You can let us know if you enjoyed the podcast. You can give us any comments. You can let us know if you want to, how do I say this? Tell us that we were wrong. You can let us know that's fine. But, you know, if you're nice about it, if you're very kind to us, it will actually give you a little boost of happy chemicals too.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month.